So we fully entered turn 48, 1725. A few events came up. The Spanish had a death of a monarch replaced by one who... The one they had was in good health, replaced by one who will die on the same round with the same values, but ill. I'm not sure whether or not that's actually a new monarch. You know, you decide these things kind of as you're playing if you want them. The only other event I've got written down is looting for the Spanish, which created this piracy and reduced their income a little bit. We had some others like English troop revolts. They lost some forces. Somebody lost... Oh, the Austrians lost their navy. That doesn't exist, yeah. In terms of events, 2 of the 3 events were rolled over here on the period 7 chart. One of them was just a destabilization, which again would have knocked Poland down. Poland's very unlikely to stay with you. It did knock Prussia off the map, or off the chart for France, so they won't be calling them in. Dropped Baden down from vassal into entering war for the Austrians. And I think it reduced Holland, England's big hope. England's out of allies to call on. The whole reason they entered this war was to provide their allied forces. Well, that's just getting reduced. Yes, they've got Portugal in the war, but there's no Portuguese navy anymore. So, the only event that really took effect... We also had one that depended on the Act of Union. The only one that took effect was the Confederation of the Bar, which means that Poland will not allow itself to be divided. Even if the French king doesn't succeed, Poland's decided to fight against any of the partitions that come. Now, the first partition that happens, that'll cause a war if it goes on. If the war succeeds, the Confederation of the Bar is destroyed, but there are other entries for it, so a like-minded confederation can be formed in between these wars or whenever. But if too many rolls happen early before the divisions take place, the first war will make them available to be partitioned at will. I don't see a lot going on for diplomacy, but we'll see. The only trigger I'm looking at right now is, hey, Russia's kind of low on the stability, but this might be their opportunity to take on the Crimea. They can get the declaration of war for cheap, but the problem is Turkey's out of their war with Poland now. And Russia's probably not willing to enter this war without Spanish aid at the very least. The Spanish have totally committed to being willing to do this, and they're prepared, but they'd kind of like to clear up their problems out here. I'm not sure they have to. So that's the big decision point here is, can the Turks convince the Spanish to enter the war? Or can the Russians convince the Spanish into this war? Because that would be a sufficient distraction, perhaps. Or do they want to wait and maybe see if the Austrians will enter, etc.? But they really, they can't just take the Crimea in one chunk. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 provinces. That means it's going to take 2 wars to wipe it out. Even though Russia can wipe things completely out, they still have to take them 3 bits at a time or whatever. So they may need to get this on, given the delays that they've had previously. They really do need to have this war concluded by the end of this period, and that period ends when? Fairly late, down here in 1755. There's room, certainly, for 2, maybe 3 wars, but it's pushing it, It's definitely pushing it, and, with the recovery period, etc. But Russia's stability is way below Turkey's, and it may be better. See, they're getting it cheaper because they have a casus belli due to that rebellion. It may be cheaper to take it now, but what are their chances of actually succeeding against the Turks at this point? It seems pretty low right now. I don't know. Yeah, the Russians were talked out of it and are not going to war with anyone. And nobody else is either. The only actions were some minor diplomatic actions. France improved its status with Switzerland. The Spanish grabbed Genoa for an anti-Turkish possibility. They will need more fleets. And the Turks upped Algeria up to Expeditionary Corps. And that's probably where both are going to keep it, although the Spanish might actually commit Genoa fully with the idea of needing the reinforcements because they can't really afford to build a fleet the way they'd like to be able to. Anyway, on to the economic stuff. Okay, well, we finished the economics for 1725, and this is the era when Poland really becomes weak. They have a -3 from now on to their ability to build armies. Even if they have this confederation of the bar, they still have this penalty for building up a valid army, or a valuable army. And so that's going against them. But on the other hand, their opponent, in this case really Austria, is really, really strapped. They basically had to take a loan out to pay for their loans, paying 50% interest on it. They only could get a $90 loan. It was a foreign loan, I think. No, they went with the national. They got rid of the penalties for that. But they also have had to take out, just after building some infantry, they had to take out a extraordinary tax, which is painful when you've got a low stability because stability's tripled in adding to that. Now they have a very good minister, so that worked out well. Not a lot of big actions because a lot of the players, for example, in terms of expanding trading posts, are seeing, oh, those are really risky right now. Although we do see Russia popping in here and getting into the spice trade. Russia doesn't have an enhanced FTI for this, foreign trade investments. But with a conquistador placed there, it's kind of cool. We also see the Spanish, another peaceful nation, popping into where the French were. And, you know, filling these vacuums. It's the cost of being at war. These trading posts are very, very risky. And if someone decides, okay, I'm going to damage you and not really seek to gain things for myself, they can really do so. And that's what England's goal is at this point. Really looking at the game. One of my viewers mentioned, hey, England's really hosed. And yeah, they really are. But what's kind of interesting here is England would have had a pretty good chance, I think. Maybe they wouldn't have been able to surpass France, but they get some 10 victory points a turn or something just for maintaining their trade. But by being at war, they lose their trade. Now, my misinterpretation of the rules, and it's a deliberate misinterpretation, which doesn't allow the trading fleets to come back over as broad an area as easily. Basically, and this was in part to simplify my record keeping, but also because it didn't really make sense to me that there would be no cost to retrieving your trading fleets. Well, the way the rules, if I recall correctly, I didn't look this up, but the way the rules handle the trading fleets is every one of your trading fleets that's been decreased yet still is sort of there, and piracy does that. Competition does that if it's not an enforced competition, if somebody pays to compete with you. Those all come back by one level automatically without any worries. Now, I do that still for the neutrals because they're usually not a problem, although that's a big deal for the Dutch because they have so many fleets on the board. But the early ones, when I first look at it, I think, well, it makes sense to do it with them. They're not going to gain much that way. But when you look at somebody like England growing that way, and which way is more historical, I'm not sure. I could make arguments in either direction. But the way the game kind of sets you up is, hey, you know, if these are all recuperating slowly, and you could still do an investment somewhere else that would provide less damage from the war. And I could definitely see that situation being the case. If you've only got a few of them, though, it allows you to recuperate for free, which you do anyway, but very quickly so that you can gain more victory points. You can just slap your 4 or whatever, your trading fleets automatically into the areas where you've taken damage. So here where we have a really large trading fleet empire, it is a little, I think, more vulnerable to warfare. And you could say, okay, that's a disincentive for England to enter the wars that historically they did enter. And I can agree with that, but there are a lot of other places in the game where the victory point choices actually kind of disincentivize you from doing what you probably, what was done historically and the historical mindset on them. So I'm not too too disturbed by it. It's how I've always played since the first or second playing that I've done. But it does definitely, I think, create this sort of problem in terms of, okay, England doesn't really want to get involved in these wars at all. They're too damaging. Now, in terms of the damage during the war, this is all going to be pretty close to the same. They might be pulling more income in because they'd be cropping up everywhere. But they wouldn't be pulling the victory points. And the victory points are the real cost. You could say, well, their income being damaged is a big deal, and it is. They're at crap income at this point. They're pulling in a little over 300 bucks on this turn because of how bad their stability was. But, you know, this is a war that they've lost. And the problem here, though, is their recovery is not going to be an across the board. Now, why did I choose this for my own simplicity? On one side, it's because, well, here's the big reason. The big reason is that, one, I didn't think it was completely correct to say that shipping would recover across the board everywhere. Real losses and real damage were done, both to the trade contacts, people in the area picking up other, using other trading fleets, etc., although where it's completely wiped out, that might not be the case. Other avenues to get goods, maybe beginning to build their own industry, etc., though, which might be the case, making it more difficult for the English to slip in. Plus, they got to build these ships again. They really do. The trading ships are going to cost something, and the question is, what are they costing? And to me, it seemed a little unreasonable to say you could cover everywhere. But the reason it's simpler is because, okay, if they get free everywhere, that's easy enough to handle. I can just up each one by one on any given turn. But where do their investments go? They can't really invest where they've already got some. That's not going to do any good, so those are kind of off-board, just cropping up for free, and the other ones, and it just becomes this, it wasn't really clear how to handle it, whereas with the solution that I chose, which seems to work well in the early part of the game, before these massive trading fleets that are really the way that England or the Dutch can win the game. Especially the Dutch. They're scary how big they can get. And I'm kicking myself as the Austrian player saying, man, that was a mistake. I'm in this hosed position where I'm like facing France just as badly as the Dutch were. I don't really have a better army available to me because I don't have the income that the Dutch had, and I don't have the victory points. Of course, maybe there would be an Anglo-Dutch war. There's definitely a reason to believe that the English, at least if the Dutch are doing well, will work against them. But in this, and they also want to drop their trade fleet down so that they can get the center of trade. So anyway, that's some of the insight into some of the changes that I made and some of the decisions I made that I think were bad. The change that I make, I'm really clearly seeing why it's a weakness at this point. I don't think I've ever seen the English as vociferously anti-French as they have been in this game. I don't think I've seen the French running away with it in this way, and where I decided the English would actually intervene. Other times I said, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I don't want to go to war. And there's a good reason you don't want to go to war. But here I'm seeing the effects of that. Anyway, I spent a lot of time chattering on this, but we're about to jump into the rounds. I've got some of the vids, sitting on my computer because I did, what the hell was it? Founding Fathers. And, so I've got more room on here, so it doesn't seem as dangerous as it really is, but it is. Well, often the first round is intensive. It's not really the case so much here. More action happening in the rest of the world. The French clashed with the English here and largely destroyed the garrison at Connecticut. England is considering pulling their army out so they can rebuild it later, but then that means Connecticut will be under siege, so maybe they'll continue fighting. The English themselves went and started sieging French trading post, whereas the French went and destroyed an English one, and now the Russians have slipped in to start getting involved in the slave trade. Granted, that's far from where the Russians maybe would be projecting their interest, but honestly, Russia doesn't expect to get into one of these big naval wars. Of course, as they start building trading posts, they'll become more open to threats from other countries. So they may get drawn into the world stage in a way that they haven't been other than by this Polish conflict. Oh, I forgot about this English-French conflict. Oh, the English intercepted the French when the French moved to blockade them. Got to take care of that. The Austrians got beaten back in an attempt here, and French sieges are continuing throughout. The English fleets, the trade fleets, the Smyrna and the Indies Orientales, both made it in at losses, maybe 40% losses across the board, but the extra money's helpful. That's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Every turn that the Turks keep assigning the trade fleet not to France, France is going to have a casus belli on the next turn. So if this war ends, it's possible France may enter into one of these grand anti-Turkish alliances. I don't think it's too likely. But if France gets too pissed at Turkish intervention against them in the Med, if they start using their privateers, for example, the French may have, you may see the Turks starting to assign that fleet to the French instead at that point. Right now it feels safe though, but it could be dangerous if they start exerting those privateers again. All right, well, I'll handle that naval engagement. The second round, on the other hand, was extraordinarily exciting. Let's take a look first on the rest of the world map. The French managed to break through at Connecticut and now they're laying siege to it. Great. But the English fleet under Hawke came down here to deal with the French, try to knock them out. They got defeated and destroyed. Then the French fleet, with troops on board, sails around, finds that Portuguese fleet down here under Anson, manages to defeat that, but it's kind of an exciting defeat, actually, because not only did they beat the Navy, it went into here, they landed troops, burnt the trading post on the fleet, forcing it back out, beat it again, and drove it back here. Now it's down to like a single transport ship. It can't do anything to relieve these guys as long as there's a French fleet around. Well, it can sail up to here and try to provide supplies, but the French could intercept that, and then easily they would destroy it. It's just a transport fleet. So that's kind of a big question for them. Do they want to spend another there? Then the French defeated and destroyed the English fleet up here. This is what happens when you get command of the sea. Now, yes, the French paid for it. Had they maybe diverted some squadrons earlier and crushed the English fleets, maybe they wouldn't have paid with their trading posts out here. But now the English trading posts are all open, and there's really nothing the English can do about it. So, you know, basically their empire out here in the Pacific is falling at the same time as this one's being chiseled away. For the Poles, well, they intercepted the Austrians coming in to West Prussia. Their army's in pretty bad shape at this point, but they keep driving the Austrians back. Meanwhile, the French sieges in Europe are continuing. Nobody else is doing much of anything. Spanish are fighting. Ooh, I forgot to roll their die for this. But the Spanish got rid of the pirates here that came up because of all the revolts, and they're fighting the insurrection still. Okay, and the rounds continue. The French continue to destroy the English trading posts. Their sieges have been successful. The Polish army is gone, though, and the Austrians have a chance maybe to get a limited peace against Poland, which will say no French king. And by doing that, well, they're going to have to surrender probably a pretty hefty victory. Remember, there's only a 3-point maximum bonus, but that brings it up to level 5 the way the stabilities are right now. Now, depending on investments, etc., that could change. Even though the modifiers are at like minus 14 for the Austrians there. Those don't come into play between major powers in the same way. They don't have any carryover. It's just a matter of, it would take a lot of victories for the Austrians to regain their point here, or for the British to regain their point. The British are basically doing nothing. They withdrew their leader and let the Portuguese squadron be destroyed. And after what amounts to a couple more rounds, let's see what we got. The French have grabbed the most valuable of the English trading posts. They've also grabbed a slave one. This was kind of a hard call because taking the Indian one, the Indian posts become important in the final round or period of the game. Spanish have cleared up their problem over here on Hispaniola, and the French failed here. They succeeded in, not complete failure, but they didn't take it. They succeeded in the Pale, and they did not succeed here. The Austrians couldn't spend any more money after taking Posen, but at least they got it, and that reduces things to a 0 with the Poles. Now, that means a piece of level 0 would take them a 10 to take, because there's the -3 penalty for Poland, -2 for a separate piece. But if they offer a level 2 piece, they can get it on a 6 or better. That means giving money to the Poles, which could be a problem because they're probably going to be having to give money to the French too. It probably would mean a bankruptcy for Austria, although they may be facing one no matter what. And they can't give many provinces without their acceptance. So it's a painful situation for Austria no matter what. Anyway, we'll go to the administrative phase, see what happens. I'm pretty sure there's a peace happening here. There may be, well, there's not going to be any chance of negotiation on this because it involves the Polish question. So if Poland gets taken away, France wants the full peace. They're not in that bad a shape, and they've got so many advantages that as long as they can get it, they want it. And I don't think that Austria and England can hold out any longer. England certainly wants out before they lose any more of their trade. They're just so hosed here. At least they get to save Connecticut, but they're going to lose more of Ireland at a cost. Now, this is a weird question. Would England really give up Ireland rather than its colonial possessions? The colonial possessions are worth more. And it's a hard call either way. The French would love to get one of these last 2 English colonies out of the American coast, because these suckers are each producing tobacco. Now, the French could challenge for that, but they're not as good at commercial challenges. And if they fail at it, well, their colony loses levels. So, you know, there's a significant cost to trying to do a commercial challenge there, whereas they're producing some pretty good income here. If they could just get the English out of there, they could produce a lot of income. Yeah, we'll see. And that's the end of turn 48. That goes into 1730 turn, which means these triple-decker ships are coming up. Well, the war ended. The Austrians got their lucky roll. It wasn't terribly lucky, but they managed to get that piece of level 2 in Poland's favor, which means they're going to owe Poland $100. That's something they could have done without losing, but it's not that bad a price. Then the French took their revenge entirely on the English. Now, they could have been spiteful about Austria's negotiation with Poland, depriving them, but honestly they feel like that was to be expected, and they certainly didn't want Austrian territory in terms of Innsbruck. What they might have done is try to bankrupt Austria. Austria may go bankrupt anyway, but $100 they can probably afford, even with their stability in the crapper. What they took from England now, the 2 trading posts, that counts as 1 capture, and then all the rest they could take, which was some Irish territories. They offered England, hey, you want to give us something else? England said, no, you can have the Irish. And so we're seeing, this slow encroachment of the French on the Irish, as well as this tremendous improvement. This is going to help their economy greatly. And I wouldn't be shocked to start seeing French trade trying to compete with the English. I don't think they can succeed. Their speed won't be as good as the English recovering their trade will be. Got more pirates showing up here again because of all these revolts. Somebody's got to go quell them, because otherwise there will be continuous piracy there. Those don't turn into a nationality, which I think is kind of unfortunate. If something is captured that much, you'd almost wish it became its own little country and declared liberty, but that's not an option for colonial territories, except in the case of something like the United States, which may not happen to Britain. It could happen to someone else, conceivably. England gets sort of the first shot at it. Otherwise, victory point-wise, horrible turn for the English. They lost 40-something points. That puts them down to 643. The Dutch also lost I think about 15 points, down to 615. The French didn't gain as much, but they're up to 938. And other people are actually not just holding steady, but some of them are actually gaining, like the Turks gained some more points this turn. Spain is starting to show some gaining of points. I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, although they do have some fleets. See, that's the thing. These trading fleets are so important to your victory points that staying out of war. And then, of course, Turkey and Spain have this little 3-point bonus that the war people, these guys are getting penalized 3 points a year. And anyway, I'll combine this up and send it up, and we'll start another turn.